I was on a road trip, one of those spur of the moment decisions. I had this long weekend and figured I'd just drive out and see where the road took me. It was nice at first, just me, some music, and the open road. It was pretty late though, probably around 9 or 10 p.m., and I was getting tired. Plus, my gas gauge was dipping dangerously low. I needed to find a gas station soon, or I'd be stranded in the middle of nowhere. I had been driving for miles without seeing a single sign of civilization, and just when I was starting to get really anxious, I saw a gas station sign up ahead. It was one of those old, beat-up ones you see in horror movies, you know? The neon sign was flickering, only half the letters lit up, but it was open. At least that's what it seemed like. I pulled into the station, and it was eerie how quiet it was. There weren't any other cars around, not even parked outside. Just my car and this lonely gas station in the middle of nowhere. The place looked like it hadn't been updated in decades. The lights were dim, and there was this old-school pump that I hadn't seen in ages. The kind you actually have to go inside and pay first to use. I got out of the car and shivered a little. It wasn't particularly cold, but something about the place just made me uncomfortable. I looked around, hoping to see some sign of life, someone at the counter, or maybe another traveler, but there was no one. Just the sound of the wind rustling through the trees that surrounded the station. I walked towards the store, and as I got closer, I noticed that the glass door was smeared with something, like greasy fingerprints or smudges. It gave me pause for a second, but I just shook it off, thinking it was probably from the gas station attendants. I pushed the door open, and it made this loud creaking noise, the kind that makes you think of haunted houses. Inside, it was just as creepy. There was that flickering fluorescent light overhead, casting weird shadows on the shelves. The place was almost empty, just a few snacks, some bottled drinks, and a rack of dusty maps. The counter was at the back, and there was this old cash register sitting on it. Behind the counter was a door that led to a back room, but it was closed. I walked up to the counter and rang the bell. It was one of those small, dingy ones that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. The sound echoed through the store, but no one came out. I waited for a minute, tapping my fingers on the counter, feeling more and more uneasy. I leaned over the counter to see if I could spot anyone in the back room, but it was pitch black back there. "Hello?" I called out, but my voice just bounced back at me. No answer. I started to wonder if the place was even open, despite the sign outside. Maybe the attendant had stepped out for a bit, or maybe they were in the bathroom. I didn't know, but I really needed gas. So I decided to wait a little longer. I walked around the store, trying to distract myself. I picked up a pack of gum and a bottle of water, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The whole place felt wrong. It wasn't just that it was empty. It was the kind of empty that makes you feel like you're being watched. I kept glancing towards the back room, half expecting someone to come out, but no one did. After a few more minutes, I went back to the counter and rang the bell again. Harder this time. Still nothing. I was getting impatient and, to be honest, a bit freaked out. I debated just leaving, but I needed that gas. I leaned over the counter again and shouted, "Hello? Is anyone here?" Silence. Not even a rustle or a creak. It was like the whole place was holding its breath. Just when I was about to give up and leave, I heard something. A faint thumping sound coming from the back room. It was rhythmic, almost like footsteps, but heavier. My heart started pounding, and I froze, straining to hear more. The sound continued, getting closer, and then it stopped abruptly. I stood there, staring at the door to the back room, waiting for something to happen. I half expected the door to burst open and for someone to come rushing out, but nothing. Just silence again. My nerves were on edge, and every instinct was telling me to get the hell out of there. But I just stood there, unable to move. Then, out of nowhere, the door creaked open. Just a little, but enough to make me jump. I took a step back, my heart racing. Through the small crack in the door, I could see darkness, but no movement. I called out again, my voice shaky this time. "Hello? Is someone there?" Still nothing. The door didn't move. No one came out, just that tiny crack of darkness peeking through. I felt this overwhelming urge to run, to get in my car and drive as far away from this place as possible, but my feet were glued to the floor. I kept staring at that door, waiting for something to happen, and then it did. The door creaked open a little more, and I saw a face. Just for a split second, but I saw it. It was pale, almost ghostly. with dark, hollow eyes that stared right at me. My blood ran cold, and I stumbled back, nearly tripping over my own feet. The door slammed shut, and I heard that thumping sound again, but this time it was more frantic, like someone or something was moving around back there. I didn't wait to find out what it was. I turned and bolted for the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I pushed through the door and ran to my car, fumbling for my keys. I could barely get my hands to stop shaking long enough to unlock the door. I jumped in, locked the doors, and started the engine, glancing back at the gas station. The lights inside were flickering even more now, casting eerie shadows across the front of the building. I didn't see anyone come out, but I knew someone was there, watching me. I threw the car into reverse and sped out of the lot, my tires screeching on the pavement. I didn't stop until I was miles down the road, where I finally pulled into another gas station, one that was brightly lit with people around, and an actual attendant behind the counter. I sat there for a few minutes, trying to catch my breath and make sense of what just happened. I told myself I was imagining things, that maybe it was just some guy back there messing with me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that what I saw wasn't normal. It wasn't right. To this day, I don't know what that place was or who or what was in that back room. I've thought about it a lot, and every time it gives me chills. It was like stepping into some kind of nightmare, like a scene out of a horror movie, except it was real, and I was there. I've driven past that stretch of road a few times since then, but I've never seen that gas station again. It's like it just disappeared. Maybe I missed it. Maybe I was just so freaked out that I wasn't looking hard enough. But I can't help but wonder if it was even real in the first place. Whatever the case, it was enough to make me think twice about stopping at deserted gas stations in the middle of the night. Now, I make sure to fill up during the day, at places where I know there are other people around, because you never know what or who might be waiting for you in the dark, in those lonely places where no one else is around, and sometimes it's better not to find out. I remember this one night, a few years back, when I was on a road trip to visit my folks in another state. It was one of those long drives that you just want to get over with. I had been on the road for hours, and it was getting pretty late, close to midnight. The highway was practically empty, just me and the occasional truck passing by. My eyelids were getting heavy, and I knew I needed to pull over soon, grab a coffee or something to wake myself up. I had been keeping an eye out for a gas station for a while, but there was nothing in sight. Just dark, empty road and trees lining either side. My car's fuel gauge was inching toward empty, and I was starting to get a bit nervous. Finally, after what felt like forever, I saw the glow of neon lights in the distance. It was a gas station, thank God. I sighed with relief and took the exit. As I pulled into the station, I noticed it was one of those small, old-school ones, with a single pump and a tiny convenience store. It looked kind of run down, like it hadn't been updated in decades. But at that point, I didn't care. I just needed gas and maybe a strong cup of coffee to get me through the rest of the drive. The place was empty, not a single car in sight, and the lights inside the store were dim, flickering slightly. It had that eerie, deserted vibe, but I brushed it off. I mean, what did I expect at this hour? I parked next to the pump and got out, stretching my legs a bit before I started fueling up. As I stood there, waiting for the tank to fill, I looked around. There was a sign above the store that read 24-hour service, but it didn't look like anyone was inside. The whole place was dead quiet, except for the low hum of the neon lights and the occasional rustling of leaves from the wind. It gave me this weird, uneasy feeling, like I was being watched. Once the tank was full, I figured I'd go inside and grab that coffee. I needed something to keep me awake. I walked up to the store, the door creaking loudly as I pushed it open. A little bell jingled above the door, but there was no one at the counter. The store was small, with just a few aisles of snacks and drinks, and an old coffee machine in the corner. The lights inside were dim, casting weird shadows across the shelves. I called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" but got no response. I glanced around, wondering if the cashier had stepped out for a moment. It wouldn't be the first time I'd seen that happen at a gas station. I walked over to the coffee machine and poured myself a cup, the smell of stale coffee hitting me immediately. It didn't look fresh, but I wasn't in a position to be picky. As I stood there, sipping the coffee and looking around, I heard a noise. It was faint, like a shuffling sound, coming from the back of the store. It made me freeze for a second, my heart skipping a beat. Maybe it was the cashier coming back, but then I remembered how quiet the place was, almost too quiet. I put the cup down and walked slowly toward the back of the store. There was a door there, marked Employees Only, slightly ajar. The shuffling sound was coming from behind that door. I hesitated, every instinct telling me to just leave, but my curiosity got the better of me. I pushed the door open a little wider. It led to a small storage room, filled with boxes and cleaning supplies. In the dim light, I could make out the shape of a person hunched over in the corner, rummaging through one of the boxes. They didn't seem to notice me at first. I felt a chill run down my spine. Something about this didn't feel right. I cleared my throat, trying to get their attention. "Hey, you work here?" I asked, my voice sounding more shaky than I intended. The person stopped what they were doing and slowly turned around to face me. What I saw made my blood run cold. It was a man, probably in his 50s, with a wild, unkempt beard and eyes that were wide open, like he hadn't slept in days. But it wasn't just his appearance that freaked me out. It was the way he was looking at me. His eyes had this manic gleam, like he was seeing something that wasn't there. He didn't say anything, just stared at me with this eerie smile on his face. I took a step back, my heart pounding in my chest. I just needed some coffee," I stammered, trying to sound casual. Didn't mean to intrude. He didn't respond, just kept staring. I noticed his hands were shaking slightly, and he was holding something. I couldn't make out what it was at first, but then I saw it. It was a knife, a small, rusty-looking blade. He was gripping it tightly, his knuckles white. Panic started to set in. I needed to get out of there, fast. I slowly backed away, trying to keep my movements calm and steady. The man didn't move, just stood there watching me, that creepy smile never leaving his face. I turned and walked back toward the front of the store, trying to keep my breathing under control. I could feel his eyes on me the whole time, like he was waiting for me to make a wrong move. I reached the counter and quickly grabbed my wallet to pay for the gas, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the bills out. Just as I was about to leave, I heard him speak. His voice was low and raspy, almost a whisper. "You shouldn't have come here." I didn't respond. I just threw the money on the counter and bolted for the door. I could hear him shuffling behind me, moving faster now. I yanked the door open and sprinted back to my car, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. I jumped into the driver's seat, locked the doors, and started the engine. As I pulled out of the lot, I glanced back toward the store. The man was standing in the doorway, watching me leave. That smile was still plastered on his face, but there was something in his eyes that chilled me to the bone, something dark and menacing. I sped back onto the highway, not daring to slow down until I was miles away from that place. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly they were turning white. I kept looking in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that man's face pop up behind me. It took me a while to calm down. I drove through the night, my mind racing with what had just happened. Who was that guy? Why was he there? And what was he planning to do with that knife? I didn't have any answers, and to be honest, I didn't want to know. I was just grateful to be out of there, to be safe. I thought about calling the cops, but what would I say? That some creepy guy with a knife was lurking around an abandoned gas station? It sounded too vague, too crazy. Besides, I didn't even know the exact location of the place. It was just some random, old gas station off the highway. When I finally got to my destination, I was exhausted, both physically and mentally. I didn't tell anyone about what happened right away. It felt too surreal, like some twisted nightmare. But the more I thought about it, the more it stuck with me. This nagging feeling that I had narrowly escaped something terrible. A few weeks later, I tried looking up the gas station online, just out of curiosity, but I couldn't find anything about it. No mention of it on maps, no reviews, nothing. It was like the place didn't exist. I even drove down that stretch of highway a couple of months later, and I couldn't find the exit. It was as if the gas station had just vanished. To this day, I still think about that night. What would have happened if I hadn't left when I did? If I had stayed a moment longer? I'll never know, and maybe it's better that way. But every now and then, when I'm driving late at night and I see an old gas station on the side of the road, I get this uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach. I've learned to trust my instincts more since then. If something feels off, It probably is. And sometimes the smartest thing you can do is just get the hell out of there. Alright, so this happened a couple of years ago, and it's still one of the creepiest experiences I've ever had. It was late at night, around 11 p.m., and I was driving back home from visiting a friend. We had spent the evening catching up, and I lost track of time, so I ended up leaving much later than I originally planned. My drive home was about 2 hours, mostly through back roads and some stretches of highway. About an hour into the drive, I noticed my gas gauge was getting dangerously low. I don't know how I missed it, but the needle was hovering right above empty. I was in the middle of nowhere, just dark road and woods on either side, and I hadn't seen a gas station in a while. I started to panic a little, thinking about how much it would suck to be stranded out there at night. I kept driving, hoping I'd come across a gas station soon. After what felt like forever, I finally saw a sign for a gas station a couple of miles up ahead. I let out a sigh of relief and kept my eyes peeled for it. When I finally saw it, my heart sank a little. The place looked like it hadn't been updated since the 80s. The neon sign flickered weakly, spelling out gas in a dull red glow. It was the kind of place that you'd only stop at if you were desperate, which I was. I pulled into the station and noticed it was completely empty. Not a single car in sight, and the convenience store attached to it was dark, the windows boarded up. It was unsettling, but I really didn't have a choice. I parked next to one of the pumps and got out of the car, the night air cold and eerily still. I walked up to the pump and tried to use my card, but the screen was dead. No lights, nothing. Great. I looked around, hoping there was someone inside the store who could help, but it was just me and the silence. I decided to walk around to the side of the building, hoping to find another entrance or at least some kind of sign indicating that the station was closed. As I rounded the corner, I spotted a small side door that was slightly ajar. A dim light was coming from inside, so I figured maybe there was someone back there. I knocked on the door, pushing it open a bit more, and called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" My voice echoed in the empty space, but there was no response. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was small, cluttered with old boxes and random junk. It looked like a storage room, and there was a single bare light bulb hanging from the ceiling, casting a faint yellow glow. I took a few steps in, my eyes scanning the room for any signs of life, but there was nothing. Just old, dusty shelves and an unsettling silence. That's when I heard it, a faint rustling sound coming from behind one of the shelves. My heart skipped a beat, and I froze, listening. It was so quiet, but there was definitely something moving back there. I called out again, "Hello? Is someone there?" No answer. Just more rustling, like something was shifting around behind the shelves. I felt a chill run down my spine. My instincts were screaming at me to get out of there, but I was also curious, which in hindsight was a terrible idea. I slowly walked around the shelf, peering into the darkness. As I got closer, the rustling stopped. I held my breath, waiting, but there was nothing, just silence. Then, suddenly, a figure darted out from behind the shelf. I jumped back, my heart racing, but it was just a rat, a huge rat, scurrying across the floor and disappearing into a hole in the wall. I let out a shaky laugh, feeling stupid for getting so worked up over a rat. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself down. I was about to turn and leave when I noticed something odd on the floor where the rat had been. There was a small, crumpled piece of paper, like it had been dropped there recently. I bent down to pick it up, curiosity getting the better of me. When I unfolded it, my blood ran cold. It was a torn-out page from a notebook, and on it was a hastily scribbled message. "Leave now. You're not alone." My hands started shaking as I stared at the note, trying to make sense of it. Was this some kind of joke? Had someone been here before me and left this as a prank? I looked around the room again, but it was empty, just shadows and dust. I crumpled the note back up and shoved it in my pocket, deciding I had enough of this place. I hurried back to the front of the building, my heart pounding in my chest. I needed to get out of there, gas or no gas. As I stepped outside, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. There was a car parked behind mine that wasn't there before. It was an old, beat-up pickup truck, the kind you see in horror movies. My mind started racing. Had someone been watching me this whole time? I tried to stay calm, walking casually back to my car, but every instinct in me was screaming to run. I glanced around, looking for any sign of the person who owned that truck, but I couldn't see anyone. The only sound was the faint hum of the neon sign overhead. I got to my car and quickly got in, locking the doors as soon as I was inside. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely get the keys into the ignition. As I turned the key, the engine roared to life, and I let out a sigh of relief. I put the car in reverse, ready to get the hell out of there. But as I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was a figure standing by the pump, right where I had been just moments ago. I hadn't heard anyone approach, hadn't seen anyone when I walked back to my car. But there they were, just standing there, staring at my car. I couldn't make out any details because they were in the shadows, but I could tell they were watching me. I didn't stick around to find out what they wanted. I threw the car into drive and sped out of there, my heart pounding in my chest. I kept glancing in the mirror, but the figure didn't follow. They just stood there, watching as I drove away. I drove for miles, not even caring where I was going, just wanting to put as much distance between me and that gas station as possible. My mind was racing with questions. Who was that person? Why were they just standing there? And what the hell was up with that note? Eventually, I made it to a more populated area and found another gas station, one that was well lit and had other people around. I filled up my tank, keeping a close eye on my surroundings the whole time, but nothing else happened. No more mysterious figures, no more cryptic notes, just a regular, uneventful gas station visit. To this day, I still don't know what was going on at that first gas station. Maybe it was just some weird coincidence. Maybe someone was trying to mess with me, or maybe it was something more sinister. All I know is that it scared the hell out of me. I've told a few people about what happened, but most of them just laugh it off, saying I was just paranoid or that it was probably just some homeless person looking for shelter. But I know what I saw, and I know how it made me feel. It was like I wasn't supposed to be there, like I had stumbled into something I wasn't meant to see. Now, whenever I'm driving late at night and need to stop for gas, I make sure to find a station that's well lit and has people around. I can't shake the feeling that there are places out there that you just don't want to mess with, places that give off that bad vibe for a reason, and sometimes it's better to listen to that feeling and just keep driving.